spring and I'm busy getting things in the ground, including some perennial plants, because perennials, as my band teacher used to say, are the gift that keeps on giving. Today I am starting our raspberry patch, and I thought I'd bring you along with and show you all the things you need to know to start your own raspberries at home. I'm Kelsey from roughandtumblefarmhouse.com, where every single week I share stories about farming, family food, and fortitude here on our 5-acre homestead in northern Minnesota. So to start, there are a couple different types of raspberries you can get. There are raspberries that are going to bear in the spring. There's some that are going to bear sporadically all summer long, and there are some that are fall bearing. I selected a variety that is fall bearing. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Now, raspberries are a plant that you can buy typically from nurseries. You can get them in gallon-sized pots, usually from nurseries. And this is what a gallon-sized pot of raspberries look like. I got them from our local nursery, Lake Country Gardens. I just love going there. And you can also get them as bare root stock. Now, the benefit of getting them in pots is that they're going to be really well established. Please excuse the guinea that's having a panic attack about something. They're really well established versus bare root stock is going to take a little bit longer to get going. However, potted is going to be a lot more expensive. Potted is going to be a lot more expensive than it is to get the root stock. So this pot at our local greenhouse was $30, and then bare root I saw online was 3 plants for $23. So it's definitely a lot cheaper to go that route. They tend to sell out kind of fast, so make sure if you're going to be getting root stock that you buy some early, and then it usually will ship kind of later when it's closer to spring in your area. I did notice too online that if you were going to buy a 1-gallon pot of this particular variety, which is called Anne, it was $32. So it's pretty much the same price as going to a local nursery, and it's always nice to go to local nurseries to buy your raspberries. So I have set aside here a pretty huge patch for growing raspberries, and I'm certainly not going to fill it because all we could really afford this year was 2 plants, because I really believe in shopping local and supporting my local nurseries and greenhouses, and so I could have gotten 4 times as many plants for the amount of money I spent, but we're just gonna go slow and steady with raspberries. And the one thing that's nice about raspberries is they do propagate really easily and spread really well. When you're gonna get raspberries, make sure you get ones that are hardy for where you live. These Anne variety are really a nice fall bearing variety that is hardy up to zone 3. We are 3B where I currently live. We're gonna be getting raspberries just from a friend's raspberry patch. Make sure you take a look at their raspberries and make sure that they all look healthy and there's no disease or anything like that, because you can bring that onto your property if you take some of the babies or some of the suckers. So a lot of people, they are confused as to why I wanted to spend money on raspberries rather than just going and digging some up. Well, we have this really nasty little fruit fly here in Minnesota called the spotted-winged drosophila. You may have it where you live, and most fruit flies, they are going to lay their eggs in fruit as it starts to spoil, or food as it starts to spoil. That's why you might have fruit flies around your compost container at home. But the spotted-winged drosophila is particularly nefarious because it lays its eggs in fruit just before it is going to ripen. So as soon as your raspberries are perfect, fall off, ready to harvest, they have little white worms in them, which for some people, whatever, they just cook it in their jam or their jelly or whatever, but it is gross to have worms in your raspberries. And so unfortunately there's really nothing you can do about this fruit fly, because most fruit flies, if you make sure you don't have rotten, spoiled fruit, you make sure you're staying on top of harvesting and cleaning up, it's fine. But the spotted-winged drosophila doesn't care about that. It doesn't matter how tidy you are, it's coming for your fresh fruit. So it's also a problem in, I think, strawberries and cherries and any other super soft fleshed fruits. So this variety that I got is called Anne, and from what I've heard from some of my master gardener friends is that this variety, since it bears in the fall varieties, first of all, are not as likely to have problems with the spotted-winged drosophila, and second of all, this is one of the more golden colored raspberries, and everyone is saying that I have talked to that you are less likely to get the spotted-winged drosophila, that they prefer to lay their eggs in the red raspberries. So even though I like red raspberries, we're gonna plant these beautiful Anne ones, and we'll hopefully be harvesting them here this fall. So that's one more thing to talk about too, is when are you going to get to harvest your raspberries. If you plant a variety that is going to bear fruit in the spring or the summer, you will not get fruit that first year. And actually, if it starts to put on some fruit that first year, it's actually a good idea to pinch those off to get rid of those blossoms, because it's better for the plant to focus on getting more established, and then next year you'll have a really nice crop. With the fall varieties, as long as you plant them nice and early, it's okay if you get a harvest in the fall. So especially since these are already potted plants, they're pretty big, there's a decent chance that we'll get a very small little raspberry harvest here this fall. Okay, so we're gonna start planting soon, but first let's talk about where you want to plant your raspberries. Any food that you have that, sorry, just noticing June berries, like right there. She's here for everything all the time. She especially likes campfires, by the way. Every Jersey cow I've ever known has really liked campfires. But anyway, you want to plant in full sun if possible, though you might notice wild raspberries will grow a lot of times kind of on the edges of things. So sort of like where a forest meets a field is where a lot of times they are, that transition zone. So they can tolerate a little bit of shade. They're going to get some shade here. We've got some trees over here. You can kind of see my face has been getting sun and shadow back and forth. But for the most part, it's a really nice sunny spot. They also like well-drained soil, as most plants do. I can't think of a single plant aside from swamp plants that like to just sit in water. So you don't want something that's too much of a heavy clay or anything like that. So we are going to be planting these basically just in our backyard in a nice little patch here, doing some trellising. We'll talk more about that, some composting, spacing, all that kind of stuff we're going to dive into. So let's look at how I'm going to space this out. So I'm trying to be really particular here and making sure I lay this out really well because they are perennial and you want to keep these under control from the get-go. Otherwise they get kind of wild. So you want to have at least a minimum of 4 feet between rows. Some sources recommend 6 feet, and then you want about a 3 feet bed. So you can see here, maybe kind of from the fence, sorry the shadow's getting in the way a little bit, but from my fence over there up to this little dugout spot, that's about 4 feet because I want to have a good distance between me and the fence. And then from there, coming to here, that is 3 feet. So that is how wide my bed is going to be, and it is going to stretch all the way over here. And then I'm going to do another 4 feet of a gap, and then I'm going to put my other bed there. So even though I have a pretty big spot here, I guess I could measure it and tell you. I'm terrible at guessing distance, height, age, or time. I'm like the world's worst police witness, I think, potentially. I think that this space, even though it's pretty huge, is really only going to fit probably 2 rows of raspberries because we are going to put in some trellis for them to keep them maintained and contained a little bit, but they do get big and bushy and kind of sprawl all over the place. So this whole big section I have is really only going to fit two rows of plants, and I only have 2 plants to start with, so it's going to be a while before it fills in. Next year I'll probably invest in a few more plants or plan ahead a little bit more and see if the greenhouse can order in some rootstock for me, which is often a possibility. But for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the grass. I'm going to open up a nice 3 feet wide bed and get the soil really tilled up well, add some compost to it, and then get the raspberries planted, add some mulch on top, and water them in. So that's what the process is right now. And yeah, you can just kind of stay tuned if you want to see how that's going to go. I don't know how exciting it is to watch me dig holes, but you can have at it. All right, so before you plant these suckers, you want to make sure you get them watered really, really well. This guy I absolutely filled so that it was like overflowing with water and just let it all soak in. That was probably about maybe a half hour ago. I did that with both of them. Here I am digging out a nice hole here to put them in. You can see over there where I've marked where the other one's going to go. So you want to put them in starting at 2 to 3 feet from the edge of the bed because that's kind of what their sprawl range is going to be. And then you want to space them about 2 to 3 feet apart as well. So I think I did 2 feet from the edge and then about 3 feet from each other. So I'm going to get them in the ground here. I'm going to go get a little bit of compost out of our big age compost heap, compliments of Juneberry. And I'm going to add that in to the ground, kind of in layers with dirt as I fill it back in, and then we'll get the mulch and then we will trellis. So it's a little bit of an ordeal, but again, a really well established raspberry patch is going to be a gift for years to come. Anyone else do the thing when you're digging in your garden and you find something, you're like, oh my gosh, maybe this is like a small Viking treasure hoard somehow that I found, but instead you just find like old beer cans or whatever under the ground. I think you only get to find like Viking treasure hoards if you live in England or something, or Norway, or Sweden, or one of those places where Vikings actually hung out and buried their treasure hoards. Okay, so after a somewhat perilous journey out to the compost pile, our compost used to be so easy to get to. It used to be just kind of in the back corner of our pasture, but that part of the farm, the previous people who lived here back in like the 70s and maybe even more soon or more recent than that, buried their garbage back there, and with time, of course, the garbage just kind of works its way to the surface, so there's so much junk and nastiness back there, and it's kind of swampy. So last summer we changed our fence and cut it onto this side, which has isolated our big beautiful pile of compost. You have to walk around all the fence and through the woods and over old, you know, barbed wires. It's a perilous journey, but I have this to show for it. Look at this. Oh, it's beautiful. 3 years aged compost. So again, this is compliments of this wild woman here who's cranky that I didn't give her more grass. And the whole crew's here. Anyway, beautiful, at least 3 years aged compost, which is now just incredibly nutrient rich and beautiful and light, and is going to be wonderful for our raspberries. So I'm going to pop the raspberries in the ground and add the compost. So the next thing I'm doing is adding mulch to the whole bed. You want to have a layer of about 6 to 8 inches. I don't know that I'm going to have quite enough mulch to do that. Well, I might. It's pretty thick stuff. And I'm just going to cover the whole bed. And you want to leave a few inches away from the plant itself when you are mulching, because it just helps with pest control a little bit. And it also helps to keep some of the woodiness of your canes from rotting at all. So you just kind of want to leave a little diameter around the plant and then mulch absolutely everything else. So I'm definitely going to need to pick up another bag, maybe even 2 of mulch, even for this small of a little patch. So this is, again, about 3 feet wide by, let's see, 2, 5, 7. So this is a 3 by 7 little bed that I've made. Sorry, Sunny's getting cranky behind me. That I have made here, which is taking quite a bit of work. This is 1 whole bag of mulch. Wasn't quite enough to do this section. I think, again, 1 more bag, maybe even 2 is what it would take. So total cost of starting this planting, plants are $60, and the bags of mulch were, I think, about $7 for the 2 bags, so $67. Then if you don't have compost and you buy that, say another $10 for a bag of that. So you're looking at somewhere around maybe $80 to get started with potted plants like this. If you do have just the bare root, like I said, then it would be a little bit cheaper, but then you would have to, you know, increase your mulch cost. And you can also mulch with straw if you want. I just don't have a good source for organic straw around here, and I don't want to risk contaminating my perennial bed. Sunny, talk about contamination. you still smell sweaty. Okay, thanks for the kisses. Sorry about that. Hold on 1 second. So the last step in this process is to put in some trellis. There's a couple different styles of trellis you can do. You can do the one that kind of looks like almost like an electric pole, sort of a T sort of shape, and run the wires that way. I happen to have some of these on hand, and I'm not gonna have time to finish this because everybody's getting hungry, and I gotta feed animals and feed kids here. But I'm just doing a really simple trellis. I have these, I think they're called U-posts, the kind that have the holes in them here. Hopefully you can see. So right now I just have the 2 on this end because I haven't had time to get the other 2 dug out of where they currently are, but I'll put 2 more on the opposite end there where the end of the bed is eventually going to be. And then I'm just gonna run some wires, probably 2 levels, maybe 3, and that is gonna be the trellis for my berries. So that's gonna keep them, it's still gonna be a pretty wide, kind of wild patch a little bit, but since it's only 3 feet across, it's never gonna be too far for me to reach in and get berries. And since there's enough spacing in between my eventual rows here, they're not going to be growing into each other, making a big jungle. So it should be pretty neat and tidy. And then it'll also be easy. I can just take the wires down in the fall and come in here and do the pruning that I need to do, which of course I can talk to you guys about more later. But this is what you would need to do, or what you could possibly do to get your raspberry patch started. So I'm going to pick up another bag of mulch, finish putting up my end posts, and that's going to happen probably not tonight, but at the very least tonight I'm going to make sure I get both of these plants watered in really, really well. So that is how you plant raspberries. So get your spacing right, get the right plants for your area, get a nice wide bed, and there you are all set to go. Someone is ready for supper, so I gotta get the cows fed and I gotta get my kids fed. So I better go. But thanks so much for watching. As always, like, subscribe, share, comment with any of your best raspberry varieties or raspberry growing tips. It is always much appreciated. And we will see you next time here at our rough and tumble farmhouse.